Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the Pak-Afghan relationship, and especially once the government has changed in Pakistan. Interestingly, now we all know that Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is in power, and today the cabinet was also announced. There are about 30 federal ministers, around 4 ministers of state. Plus now we're hearing that perhaps there could be some special assistants and some advisors also in the cabinet. So it's going to be a huge cabinet, but almost every area is covered now. One important factor is that since there was the story in a couple of newspapers that there was a strike from the Pakistani side inside the Afghanistan area, close to Cunard and all, where there were supposedly certain number of militants, they were hiding and they were made the target. And then we also witnessed that there were people on the roads, they were protesting against that. Now, what the real question is that how can we enhance this particular relationship between these two countries? We all know that the Taliban, they have their own issues, plus the way the West looks at them is pretty different as well. Now, there are issues of culture and so on and so forth, but still, having said that, certain criteria have not been met yet. For example, women education, women rights. So the case is with so many other social factors that we really believe that there should be some sort of relaxation given to the public. Certainly, you just can't apply those old formulas and old rules, so-called the Islamic rules, in their own perspective. When I say there means in the Taliban's perspective. How will they move forward? How will the nation move forward? Now, as earlier I said that there is a regime change in Pakistan, there's a new government in place. So how to move forward? How to make sure that it's not only related to the Taliban. When I say it means that the relationship is not only related to a certain segment of society, but in general, what about the masses? Well, elections or no elections in Afghanistan. At the end of the day, now there is a regime that has been in power since the 15th of August 2021. And that means that almost about a year, less than a year, but nothing has changed so far. There is an acute shortage of medicines. You talk about the wages which is provided perhaps to all those who are working, whether in the government sector or otherwise, there is a problem. There is no system in place yet, but still people are looking towards countries like Pakistan and Iran, and these are the regional countries who are supposed to take a decision. Now, since the relationship between Pakistan and America seems to be improving, what does it mean as far as the relationship between Pakistan and Russia or Pakistan and China is concerned? Because these two countries played a very major role in bringing in peace or trying to bring in peace in Afghanistan. So what's the way forward? So before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that first.
Afghanistan remained a core challenge for international powers and regional stakeholders since the United States chaotically exited from Afghanistan, leaving the war-torn state on the mercy of Taliban rule and a dire humanitarian crisis. Despite sincere and tiring diplomatic efforts of the regional stakeholders, including Pakistan, to create a humanitarian cushion for Afghanistan, the crisis is still looming in the country. One of the most important factors due to which Afghan people are suffering in almost all the traditional and non-traditional domains is the unfamous decisions taken by Taliban regime in terms of human rights, and as well as their failure in tackling the terrorist entities havening in the country. Unfortunately, Pakistan, which always remained on forefront for facilitating Afghanistan, is becoming a prominent target of the terrorist attacks originating from Afghanistan's soil. The Taliban regime must tackle such terrorist activities and acknowledge that relations with Pakistan, which is an immediate concerned neighbor, must not be wasted, because the United States State Department spokesperson Ned Price recently declared Pakistan as an important stakeholder and important partner with whom the United States will engage to make Afghanistan stable, secure and prosperous in future. Ned Price further added that the United States wants to work closely with the new government of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on regional and international issues.
Now, to talk about this, let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Dr. Professor Riffat, strategic analyst, senior member of the university where He's an expert on international relations and foreign affairs. Thank you very much, sir, for your
so
time. And we also have with us, on Skype with us, Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi Saab, former Defence Minister. Thank you very much, General Saab, for your time, sir. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Now, sir, if you allow me, because General Saab has always been, I won't say a supporter of the Taliban, but somebody who believed that Taliban, since they are in power, things will improve. The relationship between these two countries will improve. So let me put the first question to you, General Saab.
Sure.
How do you see the latest, what has happened in Pakistan? There is a regime change. Shehbaz Sharif is in power. Do you think there's going to be a policy change, or perhaps there could be some sort of a different opinion regarding the Pakistan-Afghanistan issue, sir, from this particular government as compared to the one which served for 3.5 years?
Thank you very much. First of all, I think I must clarify that I was standing with Taliban and I am still standing with them not for any other reason, but because they were fighting for the independence of their country, and there was a power which had actually assumed, or you can say they were there and they had their interest in that country. That was the only thing. Otherwise, as far as their worldview is concerned, I have nothing to do with them, and I don't agree with them. Anyway, so the situation is complicated on both sides of the border. Across the border, as far as Taliban are concerned, we know that there are hardliners and there are more enlightened groups. And so far, they have not been able to make up their mind that how to run that country. I'm talking from the international relations point of view. As far as the inside the country, I think there are two good signs. One, that they have a complete control or nearly control over the territory. And that is why we have our complaints, and I'll come to that. And secondly, generally speaking, there's law and order and peace prevailing in Afghanistan as compared to all the years that have passed, whatever we saw in the past. The Afghan government must realize that as far as Pakistan is concerned, irrespective of our internal, disagreements on various issues about Afghanistan, we have been supportive. And I think the most supportive nation for Afghanistan is Pakistan, has been Pakistan throughout. We are still hosting 3.5 million refugees. We have been taking their case all around the world, diplomatically. We have been helping them materially, and we have tried everything. And then on their request, we also started talks with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, tried to convince them that if they lay down their arms, if they agree to the constitution of Pakistan, we might adjust them, we might accommodate them. And I think the Afghan regime, the present Afghan regime, also tried their best that this thing should happen, but it didn't happen. But beyond that, what we were expecting is, and why we say that we are expecting is because this was an undertaking given by this Afghan regime to the entire world, that they will not allow their soil to be used against any country. And what to say, against such a good country who's done so much good to them. I'm talking about Pakistan. So Pakistan had all the right to show them that enough is enough, and we are fed up. And I think the demarche was given, they were called. They also reacted. But then you must have heard that day before yesterday, there was a good omen that there came a statement from Afghanistan that we would like to resolve these minor issues at the diplomatic level. And they reiterated that they will not allow their soil to be used against Pakistan. Let us see what happens this time. So this is the complication which I was discussing across the border. Now, complication on our side. Our policy is in a sort of flux because just now a new government has taken over, and if some of us are saying, and I'm one of those, that this government is likely to be under heavy influence of United States of America for whatever reasons, we'll not discuss that, which means there can be a change in the policy towards Afghanistan, which means that Pakistan may not be that benevolent and that soft against this regime. So this Afghan regime must also realize this factor also. This is my take up to this time.
Now, sir, Professor, obviously there is this perception that this particular government is supported by the United States of America. Obviously, they were congratulated also. Earlier, during the last 3.5 years, Mr. Biden did not even call the former Prime Minister Imran Khan. So things were pretty complicated between Pakistan and the United States. Do you think after the assumption of this particular government, things that have improved in Washington, now as far as Pakistan and Afghan relationship is concerned, things will improve, or they might take a different turn, you never know. But because since America has always seen Pakistan through the prism of Afghanistan, unfortunately. First of all, so your comment on that. And you, since General Saab said that the Taliban, they have got a lot of control over their own territory. So there is no problem of law and order as such. But sir, what Foreign Office says is that in the last few days, incidents along the Pak-Afghan border have significantly increased. Your take, sir.
Well, thank you, Faisal. First of all, about the change of regime in Pakistan from PTI to Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz. I think this change does not necessarily mean that there is going to be an element of discontinuity in Pakistan's approach towards Afghanistan. Why do I say this? There are a couple of reasons for this. Is that even in older times, we had incidents like this. Maybe the severity of this incident, in which in a cross-border attack against Pakistan, there were 7 soldiers of Pakistan Army who were martyred.
Yes.
And the consequent protest which was held in Afghanistan against Pakistan's attitude because of the alleged bombing of areas in which the militants were hiding. Those have been also, if you look at the history of Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship, these incidents have occurred very, very frequently, and Pakistan had to recall its ambassador from Afghanistan because there was a visible threat to his life. So that's a situation which is not very unusual. That's my first point. The second, you asked about the U.S. regime, the attitude towards Pakistan. I think that Americans are willing to have a working relationship with whosoever is in power, whether it is PTI or PMLN or some combination.
Nothing beyond the working relationship, sir?
Well, nothing unfortunately beyond the working relationship.
Because when we say working relationship, it means that from the American perspective, that whatever will be said will be done.
Well, the PTI has alleged that, you know, after the dismissal of their government, there have been more demands from the Americans, and they were specifically referring to a 2+2 dialogue, which was
held between India and USA.
Between India and USA, in which there was a reference that Pakistan needs to ensure that its soil is not used against the neighboring countries of Afghanistan, and that was interpreted as something of a demand from the American side. But I would put it to you that the Americans have this standard phrase that they have been using in their communication, not only with Pakistan but also with India. But in terms of the remark that my friend General Lodhi Saab made, that, you know, Afghanistan is in de facto control of all its territory, that's true. But the question is that the border areas which link up with Pakistan, the south and the east, those are the areas in which the Afghan government unfortunately does not have enough control. And it is this lack of control.
And why is that so, Dr. Saab?
Well, part of the reason is the internal difficulties, and the second reason is because these are the areas which are being controlled by TTP, and the Afghan government either does not want or does not have enough clout.
Actually, that is the question. You know what I was writing? Is it the capacity issue or they're not willing?
Well, it is both. It's both.
Right.
Because if they want it, they have given assurances to Pakistan that they will not allow their territory to be used against Pakistan. But yet we see the occurrence of these cross-border attacks in which Pakistani soldiers, and DGISPR in his last statement 3 or 4 days ago had actually enumerated several incidents in which he said that the terrorism is on the rise, and there were 123 people who were killed by the as a result of these incidents.
And around 270 or 227 were captured also.
Yeah, so which means that where is the threat coming from? It is definitely
emanating from there. Yeah.
It's definitely emanating from the Afghan territory. So we have to take at face value what the Afghans are telling us, but reality is indicating us a different trend. Now, how much that has got to do with the U.S. approach towards Afghanistan, I'm not sure, because there is a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, and Pakistan, based on its limited resources, had done everything for the Afghan government, for the Afghan people, and we held the, under the previous regime, we held the Council of Foreign Relations meeting. There was an Afghan trust fund that was instituted. So these are the variables which I don't think are likely to change under the present regime of Shahbaz Sharif Khan.
All right. Now, Jal Saab, couple of points here. So, first of all, I would like to also hear from you regarding this particular question, that is it the capacity issue or is it the lack of will by the Afghan Taliban, number one. And secondly, sir, another important factor, when you see China and Russia playing such an important role in bringing in peace in Afghanistan, as these are the two major neighboring countries, do you think, sir, the current change in Pakistan will send a different message to them? Because earlier we thought that everybody was on the same page. Now, since there is a stigma attached, whether it's true or it's not, that's a separate story altogether, and that the current government has the support of the American regime, and we all know that the two adversaries openly declared by the Americans, one is China, one is Russia. So whatever they do, whether it's right or wrong, would be objected by the Americans. Jal Saab, your take.
Thank you very much. First, the question about intent and will, the capacity and the intent. I think I agree with Dr. Saab that it is a combination of both. And that is why that Pakistan has a very legitimate right to ask Afghan government that if you have a problem of capacity, let us help you. And then they should have no objection on cross-border attacks if Pakistan carries out against. And especially some understanding can be reached by identifying the common enemies within Afghanistan, like ISI, AK, or other such groups which are against the Afghan government also, and they are also against Pakistan. So we can have a combined military actions against them, and if they have a problem of capacity, we can give them air support. They can have the ground operations, whatever it is. But if the intent is not there, then naturally I think we had enough. We have shown a lot of restraint. We have waited for quite some time. 8-9 months is a long time. And if they can't do it, then whether they like it or not, we'll defend ourselves in any way. I leave this thing here. Secondly, you know that Russia is engaged in some very serious conflict in Ukraine, but still they have a clout in Afghanistan and the countries around Afghanistan. So in my opinion, this is the time that China, Pakistan, Iran and Russia, they must send a combined team of either foreign secretaries or you can say foreign ministers, whatever level they want to, and they must sit down and tell them that things cannot move on like this. If the Afghan government really wants some movement forward, economically and politically, then they need to cross this barrier, this deadlock which is there as far as their internal things are concerned, as far as the education of women is concerned, and such like issues. And I think it will work. It should work. And there are certain some attempts which have been made also. I would be very happy if there's no change in the attitude of this new government, and hopefully it should not, because we should all be looking after the interest of Pakistan. But the problem is that we have been undermined economically in such a bad way. We are in such a dire situation as far as our economy is concerned, that I do not know whether we'll be able to pursue our independent foreign policy or not. Because what we are talking about? We are talking about Afghanistan, we are talking about CPAC, we are talking about Chinese influence in this area, we are talking about Iran, and all these things. We understand that what is the viewpoint of the United States, what is the viewpoint of Pakistan, what is the viewpoint of China. So I think we'll have to tread very carefully, and it will not be an easy walk. It will be a tightrope walk. Let us see how our Foreign Office deals with it.
Now, Jalsab, if you remember, when the Taliban took over, we got to know at that time that military assets, the American military assets, worth around $83 billion. This was the number quoted. They are with the Taliban now. So you're talking about 83 billion. Let's make it half. Let's say $40 billion or even $20 billion. So when weapons were given to the Ukrainian government by the Americans, 800 million plus a few $billion, in support, so they're giving a very tough time to the Russians. Over here, you're talking about a regime which is well in place, and if they have the assets and they have been able to use it very wisely as well, then what's the problem? Then the issue seems to be of the will. Perhaps they don't want to do any operation against the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, because in one way or the other that has been a part of the regime in Afghanistan also, sir. They have fought side by side with them against the aggression of the foreign troops of NATO in particular. Want your comment on that?
That is the problem. I mean, you have just pointed out the right thing, because they had some relationship in the past, and they have been helping, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan have been helping them logistically, and maybe some other vendors also, although both of them were pursuing different aims altogether. But they had that, attachment and some logistic coordination, and that is the problem. That is why the China has not been satisfied so far, because whatever Chinese are saying about ETIM, probably this regime has not been able to fulfill that. They have not been able to fulfill our demands or desires, and probably Russians may not also be very happy. Iranians are worried about the Hazaras' welfare and all that. So all these things need to be talked at a diplomatic level and at the highest level, because a lot of time has passed, and I don't think we can waste more time on that.
Professor Saab, they believe that after the attack on our soldiers by the miscreants and the terrorists operating from Afghanistan, and you just mentioned that a good number or a large number of soldiers were martyred, many were also injured. Every other day there's a blast, these IEDs, improvised explosive devices. They are being used against the soldiers. Sometimes they are targeted from across the border using the high-intensity rifles, as they call them, the sniper rifles. I mean, they have been very, very lethal. But so this latest attack on Kunar and Khost, I'm not sure whether it was the Air Force or the Army Aviation or whatever, but it was carried out. A negative response came out from the Afghan Taliban. But sir, at the end of the day, we have to eliminate all those I would say factors which are operating against Pakistan and perhaps posing a threat to the men in uniform.
Well, Faisal, my 2 cents worth suggestion is that there has to be a process of continuous and continued engagement between Islamabad and people in Kabul. Without this dialogue, in which all these issues, particularly the issue of the cross-border terrorism, needs to be taken head on and needs to be addressed. So along with this, I agree with General Naeem Lodhi's suggestion that we need to bring in the regional actors, particularly countries like Russia, China, and Iran into this picture. Once this bilateral dialogue makes headway, then these regional countries can be brought in, and the issue of cross-border terror is of vital significance to Pakistan, not only because of its domestic repercussions, but because of the fact that there is a long history of the TTP entities which are very active in these areas. They have a long history of getting support from India also.
Yes.
So we cannot rule out the possibility of these demonstrations that were so-called voluntary demonstrations that were carried out against Pakistan. We cannot rule out the possibility of Indian involvement.
Because I can't digest when people in Afghanistan, whom but Pakistan has supported for such a long time.
Yes.
So in all the possible ways, and they end up shouting against Pakistan and wishing death to Pakistan.
Yes, because of the virulence and the vitriol and the propaganda campaign, which has been a very sophisticated.
So that campaign has penetrated in the minds and the brains.
So which means that we need to when we engage in a bilateral dialogue with the Taliban, we need to bring in this element of third force, which is operating behind the scene, even though the Indian presence in Afghanistan has been drastically refused. But we must see to it that the Indians' policy towards Afghanistan, which means encouraging the conflict between the Taliban control of Afghanistan and Islamabad, cannot be ruled out. So we need to, for that reason, we need to have a dialogue, and to the extent that the relationship between Pakistan and India will improve, it may have some sort of a salutary impact. But India feels totally left out ever since the Taliban took over reins of power in Afghanistan. They feel that they have been marginalized. So India is trying to stage a
comeback. But they have engaged the Afghan government, they have engaged all the major decision makers inside Afghanistan, so right after that, because they realized that they had an issue. I still remember the Russian foreign minister once told the Indian external affairs minister, Mr. Jaishankar, if I'm not wrong, sir, that since you do not have any influence, that is the reason you are not included in that particular conference. Well, so there you go. So now they have the influence.
Yeah, and the Indians would also like to take advantage of the so-called tensions between the Taliban regime and Islamabad on account of this cross-border terrorism. So they would like, it's in their interest, strategic interest. It may not be in the long-term interest of the Taliban, but it is definitely in the interest of the of New Delhi to fan these tensions further, so they can gain a modicum of strategic foothold inside Afghanistan. And the other part is that India is willing to invest much more in Afghanistan because they know that there is a humanitarian crisis inside Afghanistan.
And the government of Pakistan will also allow them to pass through Pakistan to support Afghanistan.
And the Pakistan government, as mentioned by Naeem Lodhi Sahab, very rightly, does not have the clout, does not have the finances right now, but given after 6 or 7 months, this is going to be the most difficult period or the phase of Pakistan relationship with Afghanistan. So if the situation in Pakistan settles a bit, Pakistan cannot ignore what happens inside Afghanistan, and Pakistan does have the unilateral right to hard pursuit of these attackers if they continue to engage in these cross-border attacks against Pakistan.
Now, Jal Sahab, two questions for you. The first is the presence of Ali Wazir and Dawud in the National Assembly, sir. I mean, I always looked upon them because the way the military looked upon, the way the government were holding Ali Wazir in the prison, The point is, sir, that are these two parliamentarians pro-Pakistan? Because one led the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement. I wish it was for the Tahaffuz of the Pashtun, but unfortunately, we got to know that this was sponsored and financed by the Indians just to carry out a problem in Pakistan. Now, these two characters are out. Should we trust them? Should we not trust them? Are they pro-Pakistan and pro-army, or they are against Pakistan or against army? Because looking at the last speech of Ali Wazir, sir, I mean, he was blaming the military. One important point. Second, sir, well, let's respond to this one first, then I'll put the other question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think instead of you and me saying that whether they are pro-Pakistan or anti-Pakistan, let the people look at the things themselves. I mean, if you are making the first speech in the parliament, and whatever you are saying, we all know that we have red lines. You know, one of them, he says that as if state does not have any red line. So, and the other one saying, you know, things about the army chief and all that. So it is for those people in whose fold these MNAs are sitting. And let me give you a piece of information that these MNAs were allowed to get elected to show some goodwill by Pakistanis, you know, whoever was you know, thinking about those political things, that they did not oppose them, and they got elected. Otherwise, if proper opposition would have been there by PTI, I think they might not have made it, and they will not make it next time. I'm quite you know, sure about it. But this is for the people to see, and next time whether they should be elected or not. And of course, there should be certain laws in this for the state also, that anyone who speaks against a policy of the state, or against an action of the state which it has taken or it has not taken, I am not very sure, for its defense, and somebody says that that is our red line. So I think we need to review all that, you know, who all are sitting in the parliament, and those who have asked them to join them, and they were mum once all these things were being talked. They were not stopped. The speaker did not close their microphone, and anyone leading the house did not say a word till today. That is a little intriguing. I think we need to see that what is happening.
Very, very rightly, sir. And secondly, sir, I still remember one of our reporter once put this question to the former DG ISPR, not General Khattak, but the previous one. And he said that if the terrorists are operating from the other side of the border, why not to go for a hot pursuit? And I still remember the former DG ISPR very categorically mentioned that Afghanistan is a sovereign state, and this is going to go against their sovereignty, and we will not do that. Why now?
Oh, well, there's always a limit to, you know, what you can take, and everything was happening, and we kept on.
Sir, limit was crossed when General Rahil Sharif was in power. When massacre took place in the army public school, 150 kids, the way they were slaughtered and killed, sir, it's unbelievable. I was there the next, and my eyes could not believe what I went through. So what I'm saying is, sir, that was the time when we could have done all this. Why now, after this particular government took charge?
You know, of course, there's always a first time. If it has happened, I'm not even sure today whether it happened or not. But I would call it, in military parlance, it was a defensive action. But whenever you want to preempt anything, attack, you know, coming from the other side, and you want to preempt it, or you want to, after the attack, you want to destroy the attackers, that is called a defensive action. And I agree with Dr. Saab that we have all the right of hot pursuits, of defensive actions. And now that we have started doing it, everybody should know it, that we will be doing it. I would like to, just because now we are talking about real politics, and we were talking about America and China and Russia and Pakistan and Afghanistan. India, of course, is important. So we need to be very careful that who's aligned with whom. For example, if Chinese influence has to be resisted in Afghanistan, then India and America must work in unison. If CPAC is not acceptable to India and America, then they must act in unison. And this thing must be understood by Afghan side also. And we also know that what is a false flag operation. We also know that what are the perception management techniques. So what Dr. Saab was saying and what you were talking, that it is quite possible and highly probable that things might not be happening actually because of Afghan government or because they are not stopping the people. Somebody else must be abetting, maybe abetting, and I'm quite sure Indians must be there abetting the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan to do all this, and then to put all the blame on Afghanistan. This game has been happening before also. You know it, we know it, Dr. Saab knows it. So this may be happening again. So I would suggest a very careful appraisal of all the events that take place and make a very measured response whenever we have to respond against it.
All right. Professor Saab, once Shehbaz Sharif Saab took charge as the Prime Minister, 23rd Prime Minister of Pakistan, Narendra Modi congratulated him, and one of his demand again was regarding the terrorism issue. Yes. And he said that, you know, Pakistan should do more. I mean, not do more, but this is what he meant. And Pakistan also has a similar issue with the Indians. But sir, if Narendra Modi thinks that Pakistan should stop terrorism, let's assume for a moment that he's right. First of all, sir, a strong message should have been sent back. We did talk about Kashmir issue that should be sorted out, but according to our former High Commissioner in India, Dr. Abdul Basit Saab, he said that the letter or the words chosen by the Pakistani Foreign Office should have been a little stiff, and perhaps a different message could have been sent across the border. But this seems to be too mild, number one. Secondly, he said that when Narendra Modi says that you know, something should be done regarding terrorism, so this is the first and the foremost important, because you know, even when the composite dialogue used to take place, this used to be the first demand of the Indians. Simple as that. A thing would start here and end here, unfortunately, and that was the primary reason we couldn't move forward. Now, sir, Shehbaz Sharif Saab in place and understands what is going on in Afghanistan. There is a regime change there. Perhaps Muslim League, since they have Maulana Fazlur Rehman, who has got a lot of clout, but this man has not even uttered a single word against the Taliban or against the wrongdoings. I mean, he's a politician, then he's supposed to look after the affairs of Pakistan. And when I say Pakistan, means Sindhi, Balochi, Pashtun, Punjabi, Kashmiri, everyone. But he seems to be just focused on JUIF, that is it. Your take, sir? If he's that kind of a person, he should be putting his foot down, sir.
Well, JUI has been a long-standing critic of previous regimes' handling of the Kashmir issue, and they have, but now previous regime is no longer there. So there is a added reason for JUI leadership to come out very explicitly against the state repression and state atrocities and the continued illegal occupation of Indian forces of Kashmir and the repression that they are engaged in right now. As far as the so I'm not sure what are the reasons why JUI is keeping mum about it or keeping silent about it. They must have their own reasons. They must be internally focused, and especially when Maulana Fazlur Rehman is no longer the chairman of the Kashmir Committee. But having said that, I think it's very important that if the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif wants to engage with India, it has to be done on the basis of the reciprocity, which means that, you know, if Indians want to talk about the so-called acts of terrorism in Kashmir, then Pakistan should also talk about, you know, state-sponsored terrorism of Indian government against the Kashmiri people and their repression. And you know, it has been almost 2 years since 5th August they gobbled up Kashmir, and you know, so the language that the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is using could be tougher, but you know, it's only a probing move. You know, they want to engage with Pakistan and Pakistan has to spell out or think in terms of its own strategy what kind of a message they would like to convey to the Indians when it comes to the Kashmir issue. But I think they have done the right thing. I do not agree with this that harsher language could have produced the result. But if the Indians
stiff diplomatic tone.
Yeah.
You can't say absolutely not to them.
No, but while you use a softer language, if its softer language does not produce a desired result,
what is the point?
Then you can always use the stiffer and the tougher language.
Now, last quick comment, sir. Do you think the government, whether they are there for 6 months, 8 months, a year and a half, whatever time they have, they'll be able to, because sir, when you talk about the challenges, the economic challenge is there, and that is the biggest one. Then there are internal issues, there are so many other factors. Pak-U.S. relationship, that holds the key. Do you think, sir, because the way Ned Price has hailed the current government and he has congratulated them also. And he also said one very important factor, that definitely Pakistan-U.S. ties will improve, but military to military cooperation is also going to improve as well. That is a very positive sign, sir. Forget about China and Russia for just a second. Just quick comment, and I would like to hear from General Saab also about this. That the current government means that the US-Pak relationship is improving. That means that issues could be sorted out in Afghanistan, because USA is the biggest bone of contention. I mean, if you look at the Afghan issue. Let's suppose certain amount is released, some humanitarian issues are taken care of, some NGOs again start operating in Afghanistan, whether in the field of health, education or otherwise. How do you see that aspect? So quick 1 minute and then one minute to General Saab.
Well, to answer your question very, very quickly, I think it's imperative that Pakistan and the United States should work together, and Pakistan should continue to encourage Washington to give all possible humanitarian assistance that they can give to Afghanistan, so that the regime can not only survive, but luckily now the winter is almost over.
Yes.
But there are many people who would like to start their spring offensive, not against the foreign enemy, but their spring offensive has
that they are known for.
Has to be against those very people, TTP, which is causing such a...
this is our wishful thinking, sir. I wish they do that, but because since they are working along with them against their common enemies, that seems to be... General Saab, last 30 seconds, sir, your take.
Yes, so I will not waste your time by saying that what they should be doing, but I will give my comment that what they will be doing. In my assessment, first of all, they should forgive Pakistan, as they had said in that Foreign Office memo. They said that if this thing succeeds, they will forgive Pakistan. Let us see whether they forgive us or not. But in my humble assessment, as long as the Taliban regime is there will be no good gesture for Afghanistan from the American side. Stop.
Period. General Saab, thank you very much, sir, for your comments. Professor Saab, thank you so much, sir, for your presence also. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 8:05 p.m. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.